My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 38 years old, and 3 months ago, I lost everything: my house, my kids, and the life I thought was finally stable. It happened on a gray Thursday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. I still remember the chill in the courtroom air, the echo of the judge's gavel, and my husband's ex-husband's smug little smile when the verdict was read. He got the house. He got custody of our children. And somehow, he got to keep his reputation clean. I didn't even recognize the man sitting across from me that day. The same man who once promised to love and protect me now looked at me like I was a stain he couldn't wait to scrub out of his perfect life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell the judge about the lies, the manipulation, the money he'd hidden. But my lawyer's hand on my arm reminded me there was no proof. Not yet. As I walked out of that courtroom, holding nothing but a crumpled tissue and my dignity, I heard him whisper to his new girlfriend, "Told you she'd lose everything." That line burned in my head for weeks. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just kept asking myself, how did I end up here? If you're watching this, tell me where you're from in the comments, hit like, and subscribe, because what happened next, I still can't fully believe myself. It started the night I got the call. My father had died. We hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years. I was his only child, and even then, the last thing I expected was a phone call from a small-town sheriff saying, "Ma'am, your father's passed. You might want to come down to the old property before we seal it." I didn't plan to go. I didn't owe that man a thing. But when I learned he left everything to me in his will, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was survival. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was just a woman with nothing left to lose. 2 days later, I was driving down a dirt road to the house I'd sworn never to see again, the house where my childhood ended, and where, as it turned out, my revenge story would begin. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew then was that my dad's old house smelled like dust, regret, and secrets. And when I went down to the basement, I found something that made my knees buckle, something that would turn my world and my ex-husband's completely upside down. What I discovered in that basement didn't just explain my father's past. It gave me the power to destroy my ex-husband's future. I parked my car at the edge of the long gravel driveway, staring at the house that raised me and ruined me. It was an old 2-story farmhouse with paint peeling off the sides like dead skin, the windows clouded from decades of neglect. My father hadn't let anyone inside for years. The autumn wind howled through the trees as if warning me to turn back, but I didn't, because I couldn't. The will said I had 30 days to claim the property before it went to the county. I didn't care about the money, at least not yet. I just needed a place to breathe after losing my home, my kids, and my pride. Walking up those creaky steps felt like stepping back into every nightmare I'd tried to forget. The smell of motor oil and cigarette smoke still clung to the walls. His recliner sat exactly where it used to, like he'd just gone out for a beer and would be back any minute to yell at me for touching his things. "You'll never make it on your own, Claire." That was his favorite line when I left at 19. Funny how life has a way of proving people right and wrong at the same time. If you're still watching this, hit that like button and tell me, have you ever gone back somewhere you swore you'd never return to? Because stepping into that house wasn't just about grief. It was about facing every version of myself I'd buried under other people's lies. I wandered through the living room, brushing dust off the mantel. A faded photo of my mother still sat there. Her eyes looked sad even in black and white. She died when I was 12, and after that, Dad changed. He stopped being a father and became a warden. In the kitchen, I found unopened mail stacked on the counter: bills, foreclosure warnings, a few bank letters I didn't understand. And then something caught my eye, a trail of footprints, muddy, fresh, and leading straight to the basement door. My heart started pounding. Nobody should have been here. The sheriff said the place had been locked up for weeks. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a rusty wrench, and crept toward the basement. The old wooden door was half open, and the smell that drifted up made my stomach turn. Damp, earthy, like something was buried. I flicked on the light switch. Nothing. The bulb had long died. So I used my phone flashlight and took one careful step down. Then another. The air grew colder with every step. Halfway down, I saw something metallic glinting in the light. A chest, big, heavy, and padlocked. Beside it lay an envelope, yellowed and brittle. My name written across it in my father's handwriting. My breath caught. I tore it open with shaking hands. If you're reading this, Claire, it means I'm gone. Don't trust anyone connected to your husband, especially not with what's in this chest. I froze. How could my father, who hadn't spoken to me in 15 years, know anything about my husband? I didn't know it yet, but that letter was about to uncover a secret my ex-husband had buried deeper than my father's grave. I stood there frozen, clutching that letter like it was the last lifeline to sanity. My father's words kept echoing in my head. Don't trust anyone connected to your husband. How did he even know about Ethan? They never met. My father had refused to come to my wedding. He said Ethan was too smooth, too perfect. Back then, I thought he was just being bitter. Turns out, maybe he saw something I didn't. The basement was colder than I remembered. My phone flashlight flickered against the damp walls, illuminating boxes stacked with old tools, car parts, and papers eaten away by mold. But my eyes stayed locked on that chest. It looked military-grade thick steel, double padlocked, and bolted to the concrete floor. Whatever was inside, he hadn't wanted anyone to find it. I tried the latch, but it wouldn't budge. I sat back on the steps, shaking, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me wanted to run upstairs, call someone, the sheriff maybe, or even Ethan, but my instinct screamed no. If my father warned me about my husband, there had to be a reason. I opened the envelope again. At the bottom was a second sheet, scribbled in faded ink. You'll find the key where it all started. The words made no sense until I looked at the far corner of the basement. There, nailed crookedly to the wall, was something that didn't belong: my old pink bicycle, the one Dad refused to throw out when I left home. My hands shook as I approached it. The tires were flat, rust eating through the frame, but taped to the handlebar was a small brass key. No way. I pulled it free, knelt beside the chest, and slid the key in. It fit. The lock clicked open with a sound that sent a chill through my spine. Inside were folders, dozens of them, bank statements, property deeds, company registrations, all under Ethan's name, but not the Ethan I knew. This one was tied to 3 shell companies, each moving large sums of money overseas, and tucked inside one folder was a photo: Ethan, arm around another woman, standing in front of a sign that read Donovan Realty Investments. My father's company. What the hell? I whispered. That's when I realized Ethan didn't just ruin me in court. He'd been scheming with my father's old business partners long before I ever lost the house. He had planned everything: my marriage, my finances, even my father's silence, and somehow, Dad knew. As I stared down at those documents, the basement lights flickered on. I froze. Someone else was in the house. Footsteps. Slow, careful. Right above me, my heart stopped. I turned off my phone's flashlight, clutching the folder to my chest, praying whoever it was would leave. But then I heard a man's voice, low, familiar, and smug. Claire, I know you're down there. It was Ethan. My ex-husband had come looking for something, and I was about to find out exactly what he was willing to do to keep it hidden. I froze, every muscle locked in place. That voice, smooth, calculated. I'd heard it 1,000 times before. But down here, echoing off cold concrete, it sounded darker. Claire, Ethan called again, his tone sickly sweet. You shouldn't be here. This property's unsafe. Why don't you come out before someone gets hurt? My breath hitched. Unsafe? He didn't sound worried. He sounded like a man trying to control the story, like he always did. I crouched low behind an old shelf, clutching the folder tight against my chest. My mind was racing. How did he even know I was here? Had he been watching me? Then I remembered the footprints by the door. He'd been here before. Maybe more than once, I heard his boots on the stairs, slow and deliberate. Each step creaked under his weight. When he reached the bottom, the flashlight beam swept across the room, landing dangerously close to my hiding spot. He paused. "You found it, didn't you?" he said quietly. "Your dad should have burned those papers years ago. Now you're in over your head, sweetheart, sweetheart." He used to call me that when he wanted to manipulate me, when he needed me compliant, but not this time. I took a silent breath and slid backward into the shadow of an old cabinet. His flashlight passed over the chest, now open and empty. He swore under his breath, then his phone rang. He answered immediately. "Yeah, I'm in. The box is open. She's here somewhere." "No, we can't let her go to the cops." "Not after what's in these files." My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear the rest. Who was he talking to? And what was he so desperate to hide? He moved toward the corner where I'd been moments ago, muttering to himself. That's when I saw something sticking out from the chest, another envelope. I must have missed it. While he turned his back, I grabbed a wrench off the floor and hurled it across the room. It clattered against the pipes, loud and sharp. He spun toward the noise and I bolted up the stairs. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and ran outside, gasping for air. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands shook as I jammed the keys into the ignition, tires spinning gravel behind me. I drove until I hit the gas station on the edge of town. My whole body trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were letters written in my father's handwriting, each dated months before his death. "Claire, if Ethan ever comes around asking about my business, do not trust him. He knows more about your inheritance than you do. If anything happens to me, check the account labeled Donovan Holdings." The truth is there. Inheritance? I never got an inheritance. All I got from Dad was a rundown house and a ghost of a relationship. But now, I realized Ethan had known about something valuable long before I did, and my father's death might not have been as simple as I was told. The next morning, I decided to open the account my father mentioned, and what I found inside made me question everything about his death and my marriage. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face in the dark, his voice whispering, "We can't let her go to the cops." By morning, I felt sick with adrenaline and dread. But one thing was clear, I wasn't running anymore. I drove straight to a small diner off Route 41, ordered a coffee I didn't touch, and opened my laptop. I typed the words from my father's letter. Donovan Holdings. At first, nothing came up. Just some dead corporate listings and archived business directories. Then, buried deep in a legal notice site, I found a Donovan Holdings LLC, dissolved in 2008, with one active offshore account number tied to a bank in the Cayman Islands. It didn't make sense. My father had been broke. I remembered the foreclosure notices, the unpaid bills, the old truck he drove until it fell apart. So why did a dissolved company still have an active account overseas? I stared at the screen, fingers trembling. Then I noticed something, a secondary name on the original filing. Ethan Donovan. He had taken my father's last name for his business filings years before we even married. He'd used it to build trust with my father's associates, probably while pretending to be his partner. That's how he got close. That's how he learned about the hidden assets, the money, the properties, everything that was supposed to be mine. My father must have found out, and Ethan made sure no one ever heard from him again. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe Ethan couldn't have done something that monstrous. But then I remembered his voice in the basement. "We can't let her go to the cops." My hands clenched into fists. I decided to go to the sheriff, but not empty-handed. I needed hard proof. Bank statements, email trails, anything that could connect Ethan to the stolen money and my father's death. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One new message. "You shouldn't have opened that folder, Claire. Walk away before it's too late." My blood ran cold. I looked around the diner, scanning every face. A couple eating pancakes, a trucker by the window, a teenager scrolling on his phone. Normal people. But one of them could have sent it. I deleted the message, grabbed my things, and walked out fast. If Ethan had people watching me, I had to play smarter. I couldn't just walk into the sheriff's office and risk tipping him off. So I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Maggie, my best friend from college, who now worked as an investigative journalist in Chicago. When she answered, her voice cracked with surprise. Claire? Oh my God, it's been forever. What's wrong? You sound terrified. I hesitated for a second, then said the words that would change everything. Maggie, I think my husband killed my father. The line went silent. Then she said, send me everything. I'm on the next flight. When Maggie arrived, she brought not only answers but a secret connection to Ethan's past that made my blood run cold. By the time Maggie's plane landed that evening, the Tennessee sky had already turned the color of bruises. I picked her up from the small regional airport, and when she saw me, she didn't even speak, she just hugged me. I didn't realize until that moment how much I needed that. We drove in silence for a while before she finally said, start from the beginning. So I did. I told her about the court case, about Ethan winning everything, about finding the chest in my dad's basement and the files with his name all over them. When I got to the part about the text message, she stiffened. You kept the number? She asked. Yeah, I said. Why? Because it's the same burner number we traced last year in a corruption story involving real estate fraud. I blinked at her. Wait, what? She nodded grimly. Different state, different players, but same shell companies. Donovan Holdings came up in one of our data searches. I didn't think much of it then. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just a family feud. Ethan was part of something bigger. Maggie set up her laptop in my motel room, connecting through some encrypted software that looked like something out of a spy movie. If we're going to find proof, she said, we'll start with financial trails. Money doesn't lie, Claire. She was right. It doesn't. Over the next few hours, we uncovered transactions linking Ethan to property scams, fake investment firms, and even a charity he used to launder money. Millions had been moved right around the time my father accidentally fell down the stairs and died. That's when Maggie found something else. Oh my God, she whispered. You need to see this. On her screen was an old email thread between Ethan and someone named Richard Lang, one of my father's former business partners. Ethan had written, she trusts me completely. The moment her father signs the last deed, we move the assets offshore. She'll never know what hit her. The date on that email? 2 weeks before our wedding. My chest felt tight. The walls seemed to close in. I remembered all the times Ethan had charmed my dad over dinner, helping with repairs around the house, pretending to be the perfect son-in-law. My father had finally started trusting someone again. And Ethan had used that to steal everything, including me. He married me for access, I whispered. Not love, not family, just leverage. Maggie reached across the table, gripping my hand. Claire, he's dangerous. If he's already threatened you, we need to be careful about what comes next. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. For years, Ethan had made me believe I was weak, broken, dependent. He'd humiliated me in court, taken my home, my children, and my peace. But now I had something he didn't. The truth. No, I said, standing up. We're not hiding. We're going to burn his empire to the ground. Maggie looked at me and smiled. A fire in her eyes. Then let's make him regret underestimating you. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman with a purpose. What Maggie uncovered next wasn't just about Ethan's crimes, it was about who was helping him cover them up, and how close they were to me all along. Maggie and I had barely slept. We were running on 2 cups of bad motel coffee and a dangerous kind of hope. I kept thinking about the email thread Ethan's voice typed out like a poison plan. The more we dug, the more it felt like he'd built an entire life on theft and charm. Then Maggie picked up her phone and said one name that made my stomach flip. Rosa Alvarez. Rosa had been Ethan's personal assistant for 6 years. then quietly resigned 2 summers ago. Maggie had a contact in Chicago who'd mentioned her leaving with bad blood. She wasn't just a secretary, Maggie told me. She handled books. She handled his calendar. She kept secrets. If anyone knows the wiring, it's her. I thought of all the nights Ethan said he was at the office. All the business trips he took that never showed up on my calendar. Rosa could be the one person who saw the truth without being lied to. We found her on the third try, through a LinkedIn message and a burner number Maggie routed through an app. The response came faster than I expected. Meet me at the bakery on Elm. Noon. Not a cop. Not a reporter. I sat in my truck outside the bakery, fingers clenched around a paper cup, and watched her walk out. She was smaller in person, tired at the edges, but her eyes were the kind that had learned to read people for a living. She sat down across from us without preamble. "You're Claire Donovan," she said. Not a question. As if she'd rehearsed it, I told her everything: the chest, the letters, the emails, the offshore account. Rosa listened, eating a croissant in slow bites, folding her napkin with hands that weren't shaking. When I finished, she folded her arms and said, "He's worse than you think." She told us things that made my blood run cold. Ethan had a pattern. He cultivated widowers, lonely entrepreneurs, and small-town owners, anyone with property he could launder through a shell corporation. He used charm to seduce, then used contracts and forged signatures to tie up assets. Rosa had pulled invoices, set up LLCs, and watched money move like a magician watching cards. "I left because I couldn't do it anymore," she said. "I kept a copy of what I could. For insurance." Her fingers tapped the table like a metronome. "But I didn't know who to trust. Then I saw your name in an old folder on his desk. I felt sick. I couldn't be part of that life anymore." She slid a small USB drive across the table to Maggie. "This has transaction logs, emails, and scanned contracts. Not everything Ethan's smart, but enough to get a judge curious." She looked at me. "You want revenge, Claire. I want to help you get it right, not just blow up." Right. Hearing her say those words felt like a physics shift inside me. For months I'd been a wounded animal, snarling at every shadow. Now someone had handed me a map. Rosa warned us about people who would move fast once they knew we had proof. She told us who in Ethan's circle could be bought, who held grudges, and which lawyer in Nashville had a history of turning a blind eye. Then she did something I didn't expect. She reached across the table, gripped my hand, and said, "You're not alone in this." Not anymore. The honesty in her voice made me cry, sudden, ugly, but cleansing. I let it out. For the first time since the courtroom, I felt less like a victim and more like a strategist, with Rosa's files and Maggie's reporting skills. We had a plan forming, but to pull it off, we needed to build a trap Ethan couldn't walk away from. The next chapter is where we start setting it. We sat at Rosa's tiny kitchen table until the sun went down. Coffee turned cold. Phones buzzed. Papers spread across every surface like a conspiracy board. Maggie clicked through folders on her laptop while Rosa pored over transaction logs, eyes scanning numbers like they were names on a hit list. I felt oddly calm. Focus clears fear. Rosa laid out the plan in plain terms. "Find the weak link," she said. "Force him to make a move. Then follow the money." Simple words. Brutal work. Precise. I loved the clarity of it. Finally, a thing I could do instead of just hurting. First, create pressure without tipping him off. We couldn't go to the sheriff with what we had not yet. If Ethan smelled the trap, he'd bury the evidence deeper or vanish. So we made Ethan think he was still safe. We leaked a rumor, quiet and surgical, that Donovan Holdings had been quietly reactivated. We planted it where his old partners would see, a business forum Rosa still had access to, and a private investor group Maggie had connections with. Second, bait. We set an anonymous tip to a financial compliance officer in New York, a nudge that would trigger audits and subpoenas if the officer chased hard enough. We didn't expect fireworks. We hoped for a searchlight. Third, pull witnesses close. Rosa called two former associates she trusted, people Ethan overlooked. They were small players, resentful and greedy. They agreed to meet, to recount invoices, to sign sworn statements if persuaded. We recorded everything. We made paper trails out of grudges. We practiced our story. Short sentences. Truth. No melodrama. The court likes facts. The public likes a good villain, but you don't win on outrage alone. You win on receipts. There were sleepless nights. I memorized bank numbers. I learned to read legalese like it was a foreign language I refused to let beat me. I learned when to keep my mouth shut. I learned how to wait. Then the first move happened. Ethan called my mother's old number, an old burner I kept for emergencies. He left a voice message. I listened to it alone in my car, windows fogging in the cold. He sounded controlled, angry, threatening without shouting. Claire, you don't know what you're stirring. Walk away. It was exactly what we needed. A man who speaks threats reveals fear. He'd made the mistake of acknowledging me. He'd taken the bait almost literally. That night, Maggie published a small, careful piece. Not an expose, a question, a nudge. Unusual activity around Donovan Holdings. Questions remain. It went out to a targeted list of journalists and a few legal watchdogs. It was enough to get someone's attention. Within 48 hours, we had a response. A compliance officer emailed Rosa's contact. Could we meet? He wanted to see documents. He wanted to know who had flagged Donovan Holdings. We were ready. We had witnesses. We had emails. We had proof of transfers into shell accounts and invoices signed by Ethan. We had a reluctant former partner who'd admit to falsifying records on tape for the first time since the judge's gavel. I felt like I had the upper hand. It scared me. It thrilled me. Mostly, it felt like justice inching closer. Ethan would soon try to cut off the bleeding by any means necessary. Next, we bait his ego in public and force him to expose himself in front of people who couldn't look away. The courthouse smelled the same as the night I lost everything. Paper, polish, the faint, sour tang of old coffee. I walked in with Maggie and Rosa like we were walking into a funeral. Only this time, the coffin belonged to Ethan's lies. We'd played this slow and clean. Paper trails, witnesses, a compliance officer who'd finally decided the odd transfers deserved a subpoena. The judge agreed to an emergency hearing to determine whether Donovan Holdings' assets should be frozen pending investigation. Ethan sat at the plaintiff's table like a statue, sharp suit, tighter smile. He looked untouched, untouchable. He had a lawyer who smelled of cologne and contempt. The kind who talks over you and expects you to blink. My stomach did flip-flops anyway. Old habits, old fear. The hearing started with small things, procedural questions, hushed legalese. I could feel my heart in my throat. Then Maggie stood. She had a way of being calm like a blade. Her voice was steady when she described the odd transfers, when she placed the emails on the record. Rosa's former partner took the stand next. He was a small man with a face that had been chewed by guilt. He answered the questions in short, shattered sentences. He admitted to forging invoices. He admitted Ethan had coached him. He admitted he signed documents he didn't read. The room shifted. A murmur. The judge's eyes narrowed. Ethan's lawyer tried to bury it. He moved to suppress the emails. Hearsay, he said, inadmissible. He smiled like a shark smelling blood. For a second, I thought the wall would hold. I thought the rules would shield him. Then Rosa did something none of us expected. She stepped forward and handed the judge a flash drive. Her fingers were steady. Your Honor, she said, voice low. These are direct exports from Ethan's accounting software. They include timestamps and IP logs. They're not hearsay. They're system logs. The judge glanced at the screen, then at the prosecutor sitting in the gallery, who leaned forward like a hunter smelling prey. The courtroom went quiet. Seconds later, the compliance officer testified that subpoenas had already been issued to banks and to jurisdictions. The judge's pen scratched across his notepad. He asked the defense if they had any immediate objection. Ethan's lawyer sputtered. Then the judge did something so small it could have been missed. He issued a temporary freeze. Accounts tied to Donovan Holdings would be suspended. Any transfer of assets would require court approval. Custody orders would remain, but financial control would be held in escrow until the investigation concluded. I felt something loosen inside me. Not victory, not yet, but a line had been drawn. Ethan's money, his power, was suddenly less liquid. He had to answer to a system that could not be bought with charm alone. Ethan's face tightened. For the first time that I could remember, he looked surprised, then furious. He glared at me as if I'd personally detonated the world beneath him. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. A story was already seeding online. Friends called. My lawyer whispered strategy. Ethan's people moved like wounded animals, quiet threats here, legal motions there. I knew this would not be a clean collapse. Men like him don't go down without claws. He would retaliate. He would use every resource to strip us of momentum, but we had made him bleed, and that blood would draw attention where it belonged. He would not take this lying down. Next, Ethan strikes back, and what he does will make every plan we made suddenly feel fragile. When Ethan struck back, he didn't come with fists, he came with fire. 2 days after the hearing, every news outlet in the city suddenly had a source claiming I'd forged documents, hacked accounts, and manipulated evidence. He accused me of staging everything for revenge because I'd failed as a mother. Classic Ethan. When cornered, he weaponized shame. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Reporters, old friends, distant relatives, all asking the same thing. Claire, did you really fake the proof? Claire, what's going on with your kids? Claire, are you okay? No, I wasn't okay, but I wasn't breaking either. I'd already lived through the worst day of my life, losing my kids and my home. This time, I had nothing left to lose, which made me more dangerous than ever. I met Maggie and Rosa at the diner that night. The air smelled of burnt coffee and something fried. We sat in our usual corner booth under the flickering neon sign. Rosa slid a tablet across the table. On the screen were screenshots from Ethan's PR firm's internal emails, the ones we'd been waiting for. They detailed a smear campaign plan, leaked stories, manipulated timelines, even paid anonymous witnesses. He wasn't just trying to win back control, he was trying to erase me. Maggie looked up from her notes. He's running scared. That means the audit found something he can't bury. I stared at the window, the reflection of the neon light slicing across my face. Then we keep pushing, I said. If he wants to fight dirty, we'll show everyone just how filthy his hands really are. Over the next few weeks, everything began to shift. The audit reports came in quiet at first, then like thunder. Ethan had been embezzling from his investors for years. Shell companies, false invoices, even donations to his own charitable foundation. Once the story broke on a major news network, his world began to crumble. Clients withdrew. The board suspended him. The company's shares plunged. He fired half his PR team in a panic, then tried to issue a press statement blaming clerical errors. It didn't work. People saw through it. The man who had once stood on magazine covers with perfect teeth and fake integrity was suddenly a pariah. But the best part came a week later when my lawyer called. Claire, Maggie said, her voice trembling with contained excitement. The judge reviewed the custody clause. He's reopening the case. The manipulation around your finances invalidated the previous ruling. For the first time in years, I cried not from loss, but from release. That night, I sat on my father's porch, looking out at the overgrown yard. The crickets were loud, the air thick and humid. I whispered, Dad, you were right. He took everything from me, but I'm getting it back. Somewhere inside, I could almost hear his voice again, steady, calm. Good. Make him pay the right way. And I would, because his fall wasn't over yet. Just when I thought I'd seen it all, the last item in my dad's chest revealed a truth that shattered everything I thought I knew and changed the course of my revenge forever. The metal clink of the chest's hinge echoed in my bones like a verdict. We'd already pulled out files, emails, and transaction logs that shredded Ethan's carefully constructed life. But there was one thing I'd shoved in the back of my mind every time I opened the chest. A second, smaller box my father had wrapped in oilcloth. I'd been too furious, too hungry for the obvious evidence. I'd missed the quiet one. Rosa held back, hands steady. Maggie filmed nothing. This was mine, the moment I'd promised myself I'd be ready for. I unfurled the oilcloth. Inside was a thick envelope, wax-sealed and brittle with age. My name was written across it again, in Dad's blunt, imperfect script. Beneath the envelope lay a thin leather book no larger than my palm-stamped Last Testament in faded gold. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a will like you see in movies, no lawyers, no signatures in triplicate. It was my father's voice on the page. Small observations, dates, confessions that smelled like dust and regret. He wrote about debts and deals, about favors traded in smoke-filled bars, about the men he trusted and the ones who smiled to their teeth while planning their knives. Then, hidden between entries about equipment loans and land parcels, was a short note, dated 3 weeks before his death. If anyone ever reads this, Claire, listen. Ethan is not what he seems. I buried the default deeds and one clean will in a safe deposit box under the name Evelyn Marshall. I didn't want to involve you. I thought I could fix it without dragging you in. I failed. If he hurt you in any way, make him pay, but use the law. Don't be like me. Don't burn bridges you can't cross back. My chest felt like someone had tightened a band around it. Evelyn Marshall, a name I didn't recognize. A safe deposit box I didn't know existed. Maggie rifled through her notes and found the bank reference, an old hometown bank that specialized in trust accounts. Rosa made a call. The teller on the line hesitated 3 times before saying what we all needed to hear. There was a box. It had been dormant. It required the signature of the account holder or a notarized request from the named heir. My father had prepared this. Quietly, secretly, he'd left me a legal thread, a path to the assets Ethan had tried to steal. But then the note stabbed again, his fear that I would be like him. That sentence burned. My father hadn't wanted revenge for revenge's sake. He wanted justice. He wanted me to be smarter than the men who'd used charm and contracts as weapons. We went to the bank the next morning, papers in hand, hearts drum quick. The teller opened the box with rubber-gloved fingers that seemed too formal for the moment. Inside was one document, an official, clean will, notarized and impossible to forge. Its language invalidated previous conveyances if proven fraudulent. It named me executor and sole beneficiary of several key assets that, by law, could unravel the whole network Ethan had built. I read it twice. Then I read it again. Relief washed through me like cold water. But there was a second thing in the box, a short audio tape. My father's voice, raw and thin. Claire, if you hear this, I'm sorry. I tried to protect you the only way I knew how. Take the law. Take the truth. Live after it. I pressed the tape to my ear and felt his voice like a hand on my shoulder, flawed, human, and painfully real. This was more than paperwork. This was my father's last conscience. It gave me legal leverage and unexpectedly moral clarity. He hadn't wanted me to become a monster. He'd wanted me to be brave, with the will in hand. I had the legal key to lock Ethan out for good, but using it would force me to confront a choice Dad warned me about: seek total destruction, or reclaim my life and my children without losing myself. The last hearing felt like stepping into a thundercloud. Rain had chased me to the courthouse, as if the sky wanted to witness what I planned to do. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. Inside me, a storm finally had a direction. The judge called the session to order. The gallery was full: reporters, investors, a few faces from Ethan's old life who now looked like extras in a bad play. Ethan sat there, smaller than the glossy photos ever let him be. His jaw worked. His lawyer kept glancing at the door, as if an escape route might open. I stood when the prosecutor asked me to speak. My knees wanted to buckle. My throat wanted to dry. I thought of my kids, of their small, stubborn hands, and something warm and lethal settled in my chest. Clarity, Your Honor, I began, voice low. I am Claire Donovan. I lost my home. I lost my children. I lost faith in people I loved. But today I'm not here for revenge in the way tabloids sell it. I'm here for truth. I laid everything on the table. Rose's logs, Maggie's timelines, the forensic accounting that traced money through shell companies into Ethan's accounts. The will my father left the clean, legal thread that rewound the thefts and returned ownership where it should be. I watched the room change as I spoke. Faces went from curiosity to horror. Ethan's lawyer tried interruptions. The judge silenced him with a look that felt like justice itself. Then the prosecutor played the tape. My father's voice, raw and imperfect, filled the room. It sounded like a benediction, not an accusation. It was the last tie that bound my story to real law. Ethan's defense crumbled in the face of mounting evidence. Subpoenas hid banks into countries. Investors demanded audits. The board voted him out. The public turned. He was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and coercion. The man who had once smiled his way through my life now faced a cell and a docket. Custody was reopened. The judge ordered a thorough review. Social workers looked at records, at testimony, at the pattern of deceit. The court did not simply hand my children back as if nothing had happened. It examined what was best for them, and for the first time, the facts favored me. The reunion with my children was not a movie scene. It was messy. They were cautious. They had been used as pawns. I had to earn their trust back, one small, reliable act at a time: a breakfast, a missed recital kept for them, a phone call that came on time. That slow rebuilding felt more like victory than any headline. I could have stood in the wreckage and screamed. I could have tried to ruin him beyond the law, to break him into pieces and scatter him to the wind. My father warned me not to burn bridges I could not cross. I listened. Instead, I used the law. I used proof. I used other people's courage. I let karma and the system do the rest. Watching Ethan answer for his crimes was a hunger sated. It was not sweet. It was necessary. Now, months later, I sit in a small house I can afford, with 2 kids who are learning trust again and a job that pays the bills. I volunteer. I visit my father's grave and tell him the truth. I sleep. Sometimes I still wake up at night with the taste of courtroom adrenaline in my mouth. Other times I wake up to quiet laughter from the next room. Moral reflection. Revenge felt righteous when I was raw and bleeding, but the real victory was not in destroying a man. It was in reclaiming my life without losing myself. Justice is sharper when it's surgical, not spiteful. Use the law. Use evidence. Protect the people you love. And forgive where you can, not for them, but for yourself. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. Hit like if you felt this with me, and subscribe for more stories of truth, heartbreak, and the slow work of getting back what's yours. Would you like an epilogue, a shorter version for a thumbnail script, or changes to any chapter?